Hey everyone, we're so excited today for our event with Raj. It looks like it's going to be an awesome one, so buckle up. We will give it a few minutes for folks to trickle in. But in the meantime, Raj and I were just chatting about what we have been playing around with Gen AI recently. So Raj, what was the teaser question that you had for the group?
Oh, I thought, because so much of this discussion is going to be about Gen AI upskilling, it's always cool to see neat ways people are using Gen AI in their workflow. So if people want to share in chat, what is the coolest, what is the coolest thing you've automated in the last couple weeks using Gen AI? That'd be great. And I'd give brownie points to workflows that are just outside of just core product and engineering. So something in finance, something in design, something in marketing. I think it's all great. So please share. I see some answers are starting to come in. Internal training decks. That's cool for onboarding. QA bot.
What about you, Raj? What's the coolest thing that you've automated in the last few weeks?
Um, I've been playing with programmatic TikTok. So not entirely myself, sort of team member, but kind of following it. I'm not going to take full credit here, but it's all the steps to sort of create a short form video so you can just kind of publish in a programmatic way. I think organic social as a growth channel is real, and so vibe coding is great for it.
Vibe coding is great. Yeah, awesome. Amazing. Well, with that, we have a critical mass here already, even though we're just 2 minutes after the hour. So why don't we go ahead and dive in? Just by way of quick intro, Raj is here from a bunch of great experience uh, uh, at startups, at Mozilla, and he's going to be talking us through the Super Org roadmap. And Raj, I'll hand it over to you to take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch, Arch. Um, wanted to give some quick background before we jump in here. So a few months ago, I gave a talk called the Super IC. I think it's a term that's been maybe thrown around here, and there's many definitions of it. Actually, I'm going to talk about that in a slide later in this deck. But basically, the notion of using Gen AI to automate and accelerate and move faster and whatnot. And um, a lot of what I've been thinking about over the past couple months is, well, how do I create a team of super ICs? How do I upskill my team? And there's naturally resistance in some teams, resistance with specific team members, leadership, security. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons. And so, what I'm trying to do in this deck is really just have a conversation. These are some things that I've tried within my teams at Mozilla. Some of these are things that I've heard at random founder CEO dinners. Most of my career has been startups, land at Mozilla through an acquisition. And so I'll share, but by all means, this is a conversation. We're like brainstorming together. This is a real world A/B test. And uh, at the end, I want to kind of hold 15 minutes for others to share ways or tactics that they may have seen within their organizations that might also be working to help Gen AI upskill your team. Because our goal here is we want to create a super org. So just sort of how this all started. Uh, when I was thinking about Super IC, I'm not gonna lie, it started with like, oh, am I at risk? Am I gonna get replaced? Right. So I've always been that consummate curious learner. I'm like, okay, how do I figure out how to accelerate? How can I use more of this in my workflow? And so I was on that bandwagon real early on. But to no surprise, within the company, whether it's my CEO or other leaders, you're hearing similar, but in a different framing. Are we doing enough? Are our teams moving fast enough? Right. So it starts with this kind of anxiety, like, hey, look at what my peers are doing. Why aren't we doing that? Right. And then, of course, fast forward now 2 years later, I think, when this kind of first started, 2 years ago, there was certainly some, let's call it, I wouldn't call it AI denialism, but people are like, is this a passing fad? Like, we're way past that now. Like, we're kind of at a point where the data is pretty clear across a range of individual contributor roles. It's making a massive impact. And so, to reiterate, our goal here is we want to create a team of super ICs what I'm calling a super org. And so, we talked about the definition of a super IC. This is a good definition that I found elsewhere that I repurposed, but basically replacing your lower leverage work. But in any case, let's go ahead and jump into some tactics or things that I saw, things that we tried within my teams and things that I've heard or seen that may work well. So here's a little bit of an agenda. We'll run through these. And as I said at the beginning, these are things we tried or seen, but this is a discussion. And so really at the end, would like to hear from others as to what sort of tactics have worked for you in your teams. And this will continue to evolve, right? This is a real world A/B test. So super IC anxiety, right? Nobody likes anxiety. We're not here to make people fear that they're going to lose their job. So we obviously have to be very, very empathetic in this process. One tactic I saw, Series C, Series D startup Pindrop, that used the CTO there had mentioned to me that they used guest speakers as a way to sort of light a fire under their teams to adopt more GenAI. And I thought that was interesting. So they would invite leaders from other companies where they're using GenAI in their workflows or companies or whatnot with success. And he would do a live interview during an all hands or a team meeting. And then this would sort of light a fire. Other individuals within the company like, whoa, we're clearly not doing enough. Look how much they're doing. And there's a natural psychology tendency that we tend to listen more to people outside than we do inside. And so, not surprising to me that this tactic sort of works in creating a little bit of that anxiety. If you're not already, across multiple teams I've spoken to, and I was actually at like a brainstorming dinner on this very topic just like a few weeks ago, recognition of teams that are using GenAI to automate certain things from leadership carries a lot of weight. Like people love to be recognized. We're all vain at some level. And so if you're not doing this, certainly that's a simple tactic. It also creates some anxiety. It's like, oh, they're getting recognized. I'm not getting recognized. We're going to talk more about this later, but we need to make Gen AI just part of the culture of the company. And so I'll talk about what that means later, but literally it means at every step in the process. Um, this was a graph I had used in my previous presentation where I talked about the Super IC, and it's a little bit hyperbolic in the means it's kind of showing an extreme. But the point is, and I shared this with my own teams, the point is what I really wanted to call out is Gen AI is providing an uplift. And so if you could remind your team members that, hey, the Super IC is real, you're trying to figure out how your own career level growth within the organization, there's an acceleration here. Uh, you know, Obviously, as I'm saying, this graph here on the right is showing an extreme sort of case, and humans are there for taste and for judgment and for sensibility. It's not really going to be like straight to the top. There's sort of a top 5, 10%. But the fact that you can accelerate in this way really is kind of also changing how we think about seniority and how we think about levels and how we think about experience. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later too. But that's, all sort of interesting. It creates a little bit of anxiety, but it sort of creates this like desire, like, hey, I want to move up. I want to go faster, right? Um, so another tactic, leading by example. And I think this is most key within any organization, whether it's leadership, whether it's yourself and your teams. I recognize that changing workflows is really, really hard. There's people who take notes a certain way, and now you're asking them to use Gen AI in that workflow, and they're like, "Whoa, this is difficult. Like, this is not normal. Like I don't know how to change this. This is the way I've been doing it for 10 years." So I recognize this is really, really difficult. But the key, if we want to have success, is people mirror their peers, people mirror their leaders, right? And so if leaders aren't making this a priority, why should you expect your teammates or peers to make this a priority, right? So the first step here is you yourself need to become a super IC. So these are things that are very obvious. I'm not trying to, I'm just kind of writing it down. And you probably already know these things, whether it's dedicating specific time to play with tools, whether it's a little tactic here that I thought was pretty helpful was documenting your day. So actually writing out what you're doing on a 10-minute basis or a 15-minute basis and looking at, could I have improved that part of my day through Gen AI? Finding peers. As mentioned earlier, we tend to listen to others more than maybe we listen to our own team. So peers or people in similar functional roles, what are they doing and how are they doing it? All of these sorts of tactics that you can imagine, but you need to lead by example. Often you hit little questions. So this is one of the most common questions I hear is my leaders are AI skeptics. What do you do in this case? One tactic I heard, this was from a healthcare company. They started creating proof of concepts, and then they would share these proof of concepts that they created with Gen AI with their leadership, and their leadership was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And so just trying to slowly, move them forward, right? It's a gradual process. Case studies from your competitors. There's always fear when it comes to competitors. It feels like a threat. I thought this tactic was interesting too. Finding peers of your leader in other organizations that are fully on board. So whether that's your general counsel, whether that's your CEO, when people feel under threat, they're more likely to move faster. But our goal here is we need to obviously make our leaders on board. If we can't get our leaders on board, it's going to be really hard to upskill your team and create a team of super IC so you can become a super org. So a lot of this is about resetting the culture. We have to lead from the top, and then we're going to drive bottoms up adoption. Um, when I mean integrating Gen AI into every layer, I really mean it. And so when you start doing this like documentation of your day or like your team's processes or workflows or whatnot on a 10-minute basis, a lot of questions are going to come up. It's going to be like, could I have added Gen AI in the employee review process? Could I have added Gen AI in every team update I send out? Could I have added a Gen AI review in every update deck? Each of these things, when you start calling it out and start doing it in your own workflow, it's going to trickle. There is an osmosis effects. It is going to help start driving more upskilling, create more adoption, and so we can sort of lead to the super org. So I think it's critical to really think about it that way. It's really reframing your thinking. Um, this question has come up a couple times, not often. You'll see this more probably in a Reddit thread. I don't want my managers to know how little I work. I'm using Gen AI to automate certain things. To me, this is a cultural problem. And so this is exactly why we have to lead as super ICs ourselves. This is also uncomfortable because this is changing layers. I'll talk about this more later, but the roles are bleeding between each other, right? Like I'm a PM, I'm doing some data science work, and I'm a designer and I'm doing some QA work or whatever it might be. And that's obviously going to result in a different kind of org and what that's going to look like in the future. And we don't know yet. But the point is we have to lead first and we have to sort of adopt that mindset that it is change. We have to be vulnerable. Because this is a cultural thing that we have to make people believe that no, we're not trying to replace you. A human in the loop, taste and judgment, they're all so critical, right? We need to use this to go faster. So it's very much about culture. Um, as part of leading by example, I think when leaders do daily learning themselves, others will follow. So if they see a leader sharing each day within a Slack channel, it could be an email update, whatever it is, like, hey, I just played with this tool. This is what I discovered. It's doing this. Others will want to follow because people like to shadow. That's a pretty good tactic. I've heard this is from a public healthcare company. They're doing AI certifications. This is not something I've seen so much being used in the tech sector, or at least from those that I've talked to. But the idea being here that you could even have AI training, you could use a third-party group for that or whatnot. But basically creating some kind of accolade or some kind of reward for going through certain things. And the key here is you have to try. I'm going to talk more about this later, but it's got to be try and tell, not show and tell, because there is so much pain and so much tribal learning. Um, this question comes up sometimes too in thinking about leading by example. I'm worried I'm going to lose my skills. We don't know, right? Like people are gathering data around this. Like, how is our brain adapting? What is the new set of knowledge? What is the new skill? Gary Tan's out there talking about high agency and high taste. One tactic that I think is really helpful if you're using deep research or if you're using anything where it's doing like any of the reasoning models where it shows its work, actually read the work. See what the AI is doing. Seeing the work can have a significant impact in making you think about, like, oh, this is how it approached the problem. Do I agree with this, or should I change it, or should I prompt in a different way? In a similar fashion, uh, use GenAI in a Socratic way, right? So it sees a result, ask questions back. Don't just sort of one shot take the answer and go, right? So you want to make sure you're engaging and you want to lead in this way, so your teams lead in this way too. So your teams feel we're learning together. We're not here just like letting it replace our day-to-day work. Okay. Creating a data privacy firewall. So this is probably one of the most common questions. Like, I want to use GenAI in my teams. I want to upskill. I want to create super ICs. It sounds all great, Raj, but CEO, CISO, CIO saying we can't use this, we can't use that. So I'll share what I did within my teams at Mozilla, and then I'll share some other things that I've heard. So within my own team, I basically went to our SVP of infrastructure, which is effectively our CIO, and we created a firewall. So our groups can use whatever tools they want. There's kind of a verbal level understanding that, hey, we should not be sending customer data. We should be, at least aware of what we're doing with these different tools. Team members can sign up for whatever tools that they want. They can expense them. So it's not going through our normal process, our normal finance process, our normal security review process. And then I remind people like, hey, if you're not using a tool anymore, let's cancel it. But like, go wild, play with the different shiny objects, have fun, and share, right? Because we're all here trying to learn together. We're trying to create super ICs. We want to look at different things that we can automate. So that's what we did at Mozilla. And I'm going to go through some more tactics here in a few other slides. Another tactic, which we talked about earlier, is actually having your CIO or your general counsel go talk to the CIO at another company, maybe in the same sector, maybe within healthcare, maybe within fintech or whatever it is, that is fully on board and figure out why they're moving forward and you can't, right? Because a lot of this, people listen to their peers, so that path is certainly quite effective. Many of these AI tools have enterprise versions. So it's certainly more expensive, whether it's like ChatGPT Enterprise or whatnot, but that's certainly a path. Of course, the startups or a lot of the coolest tools don't necessarily have that, so it's kind of a problem. I thought this was a neat tactic. This was from a consulting company based out of New York, where they use color coding within their organization. So they have a person, maybe within the IT department or whatnot, that's created a whole list of tools, and then they've color coded it based on risk level. Now, I don't know how they determine what's necessarily high risk or low risk, or if they're running any sort of review. But employees can basically submit any tool, and then there's a tacit sort of acknowledgement like, hey, if you're using a tool that's kind of in the red, like be a little bit more conscious about what you're asking or how you're using it or what kind of data you're touching. But you'll see a lot of these tactics are really about creating some rubrics, documenting it, making sure people know where to ask. You don't want the question where like, oh, I'm just not allowed to use it. They should know where to go to then figure out what they can or can't use at a minimum, if they can't simply just use whatever they want. Um, I thought this approach that Shopify took, I think a number of companies are doing this. They're basically setting up an internal VPC or whatever you want to call it, like internal proxy. So basically, they're taking Hugging Face models, they're taking open source models, they're self-hosting on their own infrastructure, they're creating a proxy, and they're letting employees go and say, hey, use whatever you want through our proxy. That way, we can get some logging, monitoring, seeing what's going on. You can play with the different sort of AI chat things here. Of course, again, this won't let you go and use, real farm if you want to play with like the latest startup doing video generation or whatever. But if you just want to touch different models, I thought this was an interesting tactic that some enterprises are doing. The other thing that you can do here is you can actually use LLM as a judge, for lack of a better term, but to basically create a guardrail. So when your internal employee asks a question or whatnot, you can first run it through an internal LLM to determine if there's private or sensitive information in there, and kick feedback back saying, hey, I think we should strip this out before we send it or whatnot, right? So you're basically putting a guardrail around that data. So just another sort of strategy or tactic on maybe how to drive where IT or security or whatnot is sort of the stumbling block in driving GenAI upskill and adoption within your team. Um, Other tactics, I know a Series C startup that's actually provided guides for running models locally. I mean, that's a very private, first way of doing things. In that approach, of course, you need a beefy computer or a laptop because you're running a model locally. I mean, depending on which model you choose. You'll see thematically in all of these sort of tactics here, make sure it's documented somewhere. The last thing you want is somebody on your team saying, hey, I want to learn how to use these tools, but I don't know where to start or where to go. So if you haven't shared some repository of what to use, some Notion link, some wiki page, some document, whatever it is, codify it. And take it a step further, codify the learnings, right? We want to make sure that's captured. I don't know if it's a Slack channel or whatnot, but it needs to be shared. Um, there is such a thing as GenAI safety training. So I was talking to an insurance company in New York on this topic, and they were talking about their approach is they're letting people use the tools, but they're running each of their employees through some safety training. So I have not done anything like that, so I don't know what that means necessarily. I imagine that's just really a determination of what's sensitive and what's not sensitive data. But that could be a tactic that could work for you. And let's not fool ourselves. There's a whole bunch of plausible deniability going on. People are using all kinds of things in these different organizations. And so, in my opinion, I like to use the analogy of the iPhone. When that was first released, a whole bunch of CIOs raised their arms saying, we can't support this device. It's not, IT approved. It doesn't have mobile device management. We have to use BlackBerry. And leadership and CEOs and team members are like, I'm using this for work. You need to figure it out. And they reacted. And so I think we're going through this right now. Here's some tactics to help sort of accelerate that. Try and tell. So moving on to number four. So I don't think try and tell is actually like a specific phrase. I just kind of made it up as compared to show and tell. My point here is Gen AI is like you have to try it. Like you could watch somebody drive a car your whole life as a 15-year-old kid, and then when you get on the wheel, you don't know how to drive. And Gen AI is very much like that. You play with a certain tool, you play with AI chat, whatever it is. There's so much tribal learning. You get stuck in some circular loop. You don't understand why it's doing this or why it got this wrong. And so it's critical that we try. And so my recommendation here is set up a cohort, whether and maybe even think about it by functional role, but like a weekly demo or bi-weekly demo day where people can show how they're using Gen AI to automate some workflow in their team. People love recognition, so many may choose to share. Some people might be more introverted and they want to share in an asynchronous way. That's fine too. Somebody else could possibly share, whatnot. Doesn't matter. But the point being, create some sort of regular method or system to share. So encourage that sort of culture. And then the bonus is people tend to lean in more if they're hearing from somebody who's in their same functional role. So engineers want to hear how engineers are using Gen AI, but finance wants to hear how finance is using Gen AI, and HR may want to hear, or people operations may want to hear how they're using AI, and growth may want to hear how they're using Gen AI. And so thinking about this bifunctional role has an additional sort of impact, so something to think about. And then the real bonus here is if during those shares, people could actually follow along. So when you actually share, it's not the output, you actually show the process. And by showing the process, people can see like, oh, okay, that's what's involved. Let me go try myself because we need to drive and encourage this sort of try and tell because this is very much tribal knowledge learned by doing. Um, Assigning homework, that's kind of interesting. So I know some teams have done this where they're basically saying, hey, you need to go spend 5 minutes a day and play with this tool and report back. It's almost like a book reading club. We all read the book together and we kind of share together on a Friday or on a Monday or whatnot. So I think that's an interesting tactic. And then, of course, this last bullet, and I don't have a perfect answer here, but the roles are bleeding, right? So people are doing work in areas that they may not have been before. And I like to describe this as Gen AI is unlocking massive creative energy. So we have all these creative ideas, but we couldn't really express them before because we didn't have the tools to do it. But now we can, whether it's through vibe creation of design, vibe creation of code, whatever it is, right? And so you're going to get more input. You're going to get more feedback. We also have Gen AI to help us synthesize that, but you still have a tastemaker in the room. You still have somebody. You have humans. You have people with sensibility who have vision, who have a conviction around a certain perspective, whatever it might be, right? So you get more informed decisions. You get more questions to ask. You ask smarter questions. We have to get comfortable with things bleeding and figure out how we can work in a more cross-collaborative way. I don't have a perfect answer here, but I do know this has created a lot of friction in teams. And so maybe getting ahead of that is something to think about, which will come out when you try and tell. When you see your finance person showing how they're using Gen AI to automate some QA of some product they're playing with, which would be kind of wild. Um, Okay. Buying tools. So this comes up sometimes too. Like, what should we allow or how should we allow it? So what we did within my group at Mozilla is we basically don't have a budget here. You can use whatever you want. You want to go play with this, go play with it. Most of these tools are 20, $30 a month. It's not crazy. Half the time, I call it AI tourism. You're playing with a tool, you're like, oh, this doesn't fit my workflow, or maybe I'm not seeing it, and you cancel, right? And you go and try another tool. Some companies have made this part of L&D budget. So if you have any sort of leadership and development budget, this is an interesting tactic, is actually just create a fixed budget. So every employee gets $30 a month or $40 a month to play with tools. The neat thing about this approach is there's a little bit of FOMO. It's sort of like, oh, if I don't use it, I lose it. And so I want to go play with something, right? And so that could help drive Gen A upskilling in your team. But we want to encourage shiny objects. Obviously, want to remind people to cancel subscriptions when they're not using it. I thought Farhan here from Shopify made a really interesting point. He talked about unlimited token spend, which is kind of wild. So basically, he's saying, hey, I tell my teams, go wild, spend as many tokens as you want, do whatever you want. The more you spend, it's not a question of like, why did you spend that much? It's a question of like, what did you figure out or unlock that I didn't see, right? So I think that's all very sort of interesting in this context of like, we want to encourage creativity. We want you to play. And maybe you figured out a workflow that I never thought about. And now I can share that workflow with my team members and we can adopt and we can do similar, right? So this is really just another way to sort of drive that cross learning. This question comes up sometimes too, getting stuck on tools, right? So what I tell people here is we don't need state of the art. Like 99% of the things we're doing, like all of these are basically the same, right? There's certainly cases within your org, you're trying to level up your super ICs, maybe they need state of the art, maybe. But for the most part, just start with anything. Choose one, whether it's Google Gemini, because maybe your company uses Google and it's kind of already approved, fine, right? Whether it's ChatGPT, if it's AI chat, whatever it is, just get started. Don't get stuck on tools. This is almost like deflecting, right? Like we want to get past this. Okay, so another tactic, gamification. Those that maybe played Farmville, the old Zynga games on Facebook back in the day, very much know about, how things can make you addicted, right? And so I built this rubric a couple months ago for my own teams. And the point here is not really to show, and by the way, it's already out of date, right? There's new tools and whatever. But the point here is not necessarily to show um, what to do at necessarily each level. It's really to play on the psychology that I want to be level 4. Like I want to be all the way on board. And so this rubric was sort of built from an engineering perspective, and there is a difference, right? You have level 1, which might be autocomplete, and you have level 4, where you have an agent really acting as like another human on your engineering team. It's taking a ticket, it's writing code, and it's submitting a PR, right? But the neat thing here is this is the perspective from an engineer, but it applies to every functional role, right? So I published a blog post a couple months ago on LinkedIn talking about this engineering rubric I made. And then all of a sudden I saw people taking it and making derivatives for other functional roles. So this was a rubric somebody had made for data science. I also saw a rubric that somebody had made for writing, right? Where like sort of level 1 writing is like simply autocomplete. And level 4 is where you basically are verbalizing through a discussion with GenAI what you want this article to be about, going back and forth, having a whole discussion. You provided samples, and then it kind of just generates the whole thing. And then you're just the human in the loop, final editor approver, right? And so it's really interesting how you could build these sort of rubrics for different functional roles within your teams to think about how to create some gamification around this, how to drive everybody wanting to get to level 4, right? So it's a tactic. Something to think about. What does your version look like in your world? We'll keep going here. Vibe ambassadors. So I originally called this Vibe operations, and more of a joke. And the idea here was that there's just so many tools coming out, I simply can't keep up. Could we have somebody who's just playing with tools all the time that we could go to and ask, like, what should I use in this particular workflow or this particular use case? And so, I prefer this new term better, Vibe ambassadors, but basically within your teams, you certainly have people who are more of the early adopters. They may have tools that they're just always playing with the latest and greatest stuff. Identify them. Now have them take a little bit of a leadership role here. Like, can you help lead these weekly sessions? Can you help lead these Slack channels where we're going to share? Can other team members lean on you when they have questions about what to use, right? Canva did an interesting thing where they actually gave their organization, the entire organization, a week off with effectively unlimited budget to just go simply play with Gen AI tools, and then they kind of assign different ambassadors to support you and help you when you get stuck. Maybe you're vibe coding something and it gets stuck in a circular loop. Maybe you're doing something else. I don't know, but this is an interesting approach to think about what this could mean in your team, right? Because we're trying to create the super org. We're trying to turn everyone into a super IC. And the key here, and I've reiterated this before, and I'm going to say it again, you have to experience the pain, right? So as you're going through this and you create these Vibe ambassadors, we need to be documenting. So share knowledge base, share tools, prompts, techniques, tactics, what people are using. Could be a Notion page. People need to know where to get it, where to see it. You might even want to consider rotating those ambassadors. There's a certain amount of learning that comes from just playing teaching and helping others. And so in many ways, teaching is a great way to learn more. So just sort of a broad-based tactic. Okay, number 8, hire and promoting GenAI native archetypes. So this is really interesting. Like, what is GenAI native, right? So I sometimes think about Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta. What is Gen Beta? Some people are saying Gen Beta is the release of ChatGPT because it's a new modality through conversations, where Gen Alpha was sort of like the release of the iPhone because touch interfaces was a new modality. So each modality creates a new sort of behavior and what you grow up in and what you're comfortable in. I look at my 5-year-old, and and she's having full-blown conversations with AI, supervised, but interesting to see, right? So she thinks that's sort of the baseline. Um, I have started thinking about like how do we hire and promote in this mindset, in this model? People are thinking AI first, thinking about how I can replace my lower leverage work so I can focus on higher leverage things, right? Part of that means even making it part of the interview process, right? So, again, something to think about in the interview process for my teams in Mozilla, we use GenAI. We give impossibly hard questions or problems and look at how they try to solve it or how they try to address it. It's certainly testing a different thing. Are they scrappy? Can they figure it out? I mean, I work in new products, right? So those are important attributes of people who tend to succeed in these teams. But it's something to think about. Can you bring GenAI into that process? Um, I mentioned this earlier. Humans, we're still providing taste. We're still providing agency. Move forward. Figure it out. What is sensible? What is signal versus noise? Obviously, one challenge with a lot of GenAI output is you get a lot of noise, right? So you got to kind of parse through that and figure out what makes sense or what's actually useful. One of the things that's also interesting here, and I've heard, is even possibly some bias towards, we see from a job recession perspective, new grads being impacted, but there is an audience of thought saying, no, it should actually be quite the opposite. We want beginner minds. We want Gen AI native folks on our team because this is where things are going. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different archetype. So it's really interesting just thinking about this and how this evolves. And I don't have all the answers, and I'd love to hear other feedback later, but just sort of sharing what I've seen. This school of thought I thought was really interesting, and why it's so critical that we have to become a super org, um, which is really around GenAI native ICs create GenAI native processes, which create GenAI native products, which create GenAI native companies. It sounds so obvious, and you may disagree, but it's interesting because the argument here is that if we don't create a super org, if we don't create a group of super ICs, we're never going to hit that sort of super automation with our processes, and we're never going to have that level of empathy and cognitive empathy and product sense when it comes to our products. And so we'll never have a GenAI native company, and therefore we will be disrupted. And it's just a matter of time. And so the fact that getting to a super org in this sort of frame of thinking is existential, I thought is a really interesting sort of takeaway here. And as I mentioned, it's kind of went through sort of 8 tactics. I went through them quickly. It's a lot of ideas, a lot of stuff to think about, write it down, things that you might want to use on your team. And we're going to share as a group here soon, so we'll get more input and feedback. But our goal here is we want to upskill, right? We want to get to super ICs. We have to create this culture. We have to lead by example. We don't know how this is going to play out, right? So it's very, very important we do that. And then we want to create the super org, so we can be that high efficiency executing organization that can run and be disruptive as opposed to be disrupted. So, short summary, TLDR, right? What are some things you should do now? Set up try and tell sessions without a doubt. So if you haven't done that yet, create a Slack group, set it up, a place to share, delegate some vibe ambassadors, whatever you want to call it, set up sessions, make sure they're cross-functional, make sure you have different roles presenting, make sure people can try in those meetings, they can see what works, what doesn't work. Two, document it, right? Document a place, you have all the tools. Make sure you have a place, learnings are documented, whether it's shared through Slack or elsewhere, Notion, whatnot, it doesn't matter, but make sure it's captured, right? Three, not really here, but lead by example, right? Because we need to set the example. We need to become super ICs ourselves, and it may feel super uncomfortable. We've been in, let's say, a manager position for many years, and we haven't been doing IC work. The rules are changing. Like people are bleeding at all sorts of levels, and so we need to become hands-on. We need to become super ICs ourselves. We need to share, encourage daily learning, and show examples and case studies so leadership buys in and sees it, right? I didn't necessarily call out here, but also critical, we need to get our CIOs and CEOs on board, right? If the leadership isn't on board, it's going to be really, really hard. And the best way to do that, have them talk to peers, have them look at case studies, have them look at what their competitors are doing. Ultimately, all of this distills down to number four, and this is really about reframing our thinking and reframing our culture, right? We have to integrate Gen AI into every part of the process. And as part of that, it's going to spread through osmosis and people are going to adopt and you're going to create super ICs and you're going to create that sort of super org. Um, Now, of course, once, as you start moving, we have to measure, right? Like we have to see that this is working. Is it making an impact? So these were some quantitative, qualitative metrics that I heard some leaders doing within their organizations and how they're measuring success. So obviously, qualitative is just simply surveys, very simple. Like, what are you doing? How are you using it? Right? I kind of led off today's chat asking the audience, like, can you share any interesting things you've done in the last few weeks with GenAI? To replace a cool use case internally, right? Those are ways that we learn. Now, of course, we have to try and do it ourselves, but that's a great thing to sort of survey on some cadence with your team. Plot. Look at the number of use cases shared and just simply plot it. Is it going up? Have we hit some kind of local maximum? Why? Why it's kind of stopped? Are people stopped playing with new tools? Have people gotten burnt out? Too much AI tourism and they're not really playing it all the way out or not of creative thinking? Who knows, right? So we want to survey time saved, right? Like if you can quantify. Now, interestingly, there's some data showing that there's a big gap between what people perceive they're saving and how much they're actually saving, but this is data we want to collect. Spend. This is a simple quantitative metric. How much are we spending on tools? And I'm sure it's very small relatively. How much are we spending on tokens? What's the actual usage, right? So I'm not going to go through all of these, but the point being, you should have some systems or method in place so you can measure, so you can see if it is working to sort of get to that success. Because again, we want to create that super org. So some final thoughts, and maybe I went a little bit fast. And just to be clear, this is the first time I presented this and the last time I presented this. Just, I'm not a regular Reforge speaker or anything like that, so just wanted to kind of share. Um, orgs are getting flatter, the roles are bleeding. We want to, the next. Some people you hear say the next billion-dollar companies are 10-person companies. What I realized is what they're really saying is the next billion-dollar companies are super orgs. Because when they're saying 10-person companies, what they mean is they're 10-person super ICs, right? And so I'd like to reframe that and say the next billion-dollar companies are super orgs. So we want to be there. So that's my quick riff on things that I've seen um, across different teams and within Mozilla. If you want to ping me offline, it's here. But I really wanted to get into a conversation. I haven't looked at chat since I've been going through this. Uh, and I see there's a number of questions here, but I want to get through chat and kind of see what other people are doing to drive Gen AI adoption within their teams or people willing to share. And Arch, I don't know what the process is in unmuting participants or whatnot if they want to share. I'll go through chat here, maybe while you help me figure that out. Let me start looking
Yeah,
at some
totally.
questions.
Well, while people are dropping in perhaps their commentary on how they're working on incorporating Gen AI in their orgs and moving towards super orgs, I see there are some folks with raised hands. That's great. If you want to pop a note in chat, that makes it a little easier for us to get a sense of what you're hoping to talk about. We also have an open question in Q&A that actually relates to something that Raj was just talking about. So I thought it might be a good starting point. And Ron asks, says leadership wants to understand the impact on the organization, whether that's cost savings, efficiency, and headcount impact. And Raj, I know you were talking about what it looks like to measure that success as you're going. But I imagine there's also this sense of how to make the business case for it before you actually see the results. And so Ron's wondering, do you have any data on quantifying what that business impact looks like or recommendations on how to get at this information, how to make that argument to leadership?
So Ron, some of those survey questions that I gathered were from others that are measuring. Now, I don't know where they are in their workflow in terms of um, packaging that into a case study. I'm sure there's some out there, but I have found just within my peer group, talking to other folks within Fortune 500, they're at a point now because we're 2 years in to Gen AI, maybe 2.5 years into Gen AI. They're at a point now where they actually do have data showing where they're seeing efficiencies by department, whether that's unfortunately through automation of some workflow. In some cases, it's even headcount efficiencies, which is not necessarily the best. In some cases, it's new recs that are quite different in the past. You'll see like the emerging AI product manager job title as opposed to just the PM. So a good starting point, in my opinion, and I'm happy to take it more offline and share what I found offline. Hard for me to sort of pull up here while in the middle of this, but is literally in our peer groups at other organizations if they have any internal case studies that they can share that could be helpful there. Arch, I see some questions here in the chat. Is it okay if I can tackle some of these?
Absolutely, go for it.
I see a question from Ken. What comments or insight do you see where that are showing that programmers using GenAI are not necessarily speeding up but slowing down? So I've seen some different data points here, and I think some of it depends on how you've integrated your workflow. So um, one pattern I saw, which is a little bit barbelled, which basically made the argument that more junior engineering teams are seeing benefit or junior ICs because they simply can't write code as fast or they don't know the answers, and so GenAI is a massive accelerant in sort of writing that code. And then senior engineers are seeing benefit because they can read code really fast because nobody's really using GenAI to generate code and then not going through a human review, right? So there's still a human review to make sure it works. But it was the ones in the middle that were not necessarily seeing as much acceleration because they're slower at reading code. So I thought that was an interesting perspective. They might use GenAI to generate, but they're slower at determining whether there's a bug or, during the code review. So I thought that was interesting. Another variation of this is really depends on how you're using it. And I think part of that and I don't know if I've seen any great plots around this, but I've seen some attempts at trying to look at Gen AI use based on level. So like GitHub Copilot versus end to end, sort of taking your linear ticket and submitting a PR simply from instructions within a ticket, um, versus stage of the product and maturity of the code base, right? So if you're dealing with a 0 to 1 product, it's quite different. You're dealing with a very mature code base, which may have templates. Maybe it's well documented. Maybe it's not. I don't know. And so I've seen that there's been different um data points that have been come out of that. I think people are trying to figure that out, but I thought that that's interesting. So there was one research report I saw very recently that says it may be a slowdown. I don't buy it, but I'm happy to share that offline. So I'll pull that up. So I'll keep going here through chat. Um, let's see. I don't know if you see Arch. I'm trying to figure out where the next question is here.
There are a bunch of really awesome questions and a bunch of folks sharing what they're doing, and I'm really excited to dig into those. There are a couple of questions that are around this theme of who is the best champion for this sort of evolution, whether it's product leadership, should we really be trying to make this process bottom up or organic? Then there's a question about, is it effective to establish a central team that's really thinking about AI adoption within the company? Yeah, so I think riffing on that definitely seems like it's
So
in demand.
hands down, I always think the CEO is the best champion, right? Because it always starts at the top and they kind of push down. And I think actually the iPhone example is a good analogy for those that were in the workforce at that time in 2008-9 timeframe. There was a lot of resistance, and CEOs like, I love this device. You need to figure out how we're allowed to use this device for work, right? And so definitely think that's the best champion. Now that being said. Um, 100% every company I talk to, every leader I've talked to has said there is quite a few within the organization where things are moving very slow or there's a lot of resistance. And so this is why I like the sort of vibe ambassador kind of model, and creating, sort of resetting the culture around sharing vulnerability, leading by example, and whatnot, because people need to see it and they need to understand it and they need to recognize that, wow, we're integrating it everywhere. Like you just sent out this email and it says reviewed through Gen AI, or our CEO just gave an earnings call using an AI avatar. Like it's coming, it's happening everywhere. So I think that has to happen at some bottoms up sort of level. Now, if you're asking for my opinion, can top down work? I know Shopify came out. I know some orgs have come out with, I think maybe it was Box, but came out with some mandates where they're basically like, oh, you need to justify before we hire somebody else, like that you can't do this through Gen AI, or um, you need to use this or use that. I don't know if that's working. That wouldn't be how I approach it. And that's mostly just because I feel changing behavior is really hard. So I think the most uh, positive way to sort of achieve our outcome and goal is we lead through example, we lead top down, but you get bottoms up adoption, right? You want people to organically figure this out and uptake. So that's how I would approach it. Would I have a dedicated group? I would use Vibe ambassadors. I think that's my group. You certainly can have IT help support and streamline purchasing of tools, trying of tools and whatnot if you're not able to set up a employee direct expense approach. But so much of this is AI tourism. People just want to play and try things. So much of it's free to try. So let's not get them hung up in terms of services and whatnot, right? Like if they're not dealing with customer data, if they're just wanting to see what this can do, to think about what it could do within their organization. Okay, kind of keep moving down chat here. What was the next question?
Awesome. That covers a lot of the questions. I know you said you wanted to chat about approaches that other folks were using and thought were interesting. So to maybe call out some of those, um, there's one that comes in from Roll. I hope I'm saying that correctly, which I haven't seen before. And that's the idea of an internal AI guild where members rotate in and out and get 20% of their time to work on applying AI. Yeah, so thought I'd spotlight that. There's talk about how to use Slack to or all hands meetings to really elevate this type of work, get some visibility on it. So lots of cool ideas being shared in chat as well.
Yeah, I'm seeing that here. It's interesting. What do you think is a potential new job rec in tech that goes beyond the traditional sort of product builder? You know, this topic of hiring Gen AI native is interesting. So one of the things I've noticed, and I've had some new hires on my own teams with Gen AI native, is this signal noise ratio. So Gen AI can give you a lot of results really fast, right? And you kind of share it out. But like parsing what's actually useful, what's an insight versus what's noise, I think is where taste, judgment, sensibility comes into play. And so then the question becomes, how do we interview for that? And so I've been thinking a lot about the types of like not thinking of interviews as and when I think about interviews, by the way, I'm talking about for all roles, not just engineering. But engineering, it's typically tasks. But we don't think about tasks when we interview like finance or we interview for people operations. How can those interviews become more like tasks, right? Like how can we actually accomplish something? Like turning this interview into a collaborative work session. So we're using Gen AI together to see how we work. You're hearing a lot and I think this is part of the challenge when it comes to hiring Gen AI native and just Gen AI in general. There is this truth around people using Gen AI during interviews to beat the interview. Like that is a thing. You're hearing that a lot, and then people are saying, "Hey, so and so entered the team," and it's like not working. Now, there's a separate question of whether they were running the interview in such a way that they're really interviewing for like agency and taste and whatnot. But what this has sort of resulted in is upskilling becoming even more important because people are joining your team, and then you need to see if they can really perform in the first sort of 3 months, right? It's more like try and see if it works out because the resume itself has become decreasingly indicative of success because Gen AI is providing this massive uplift for everyone. So all of us are performing at this new 90% baseline, which we weren't at across a range of tasks. And so on the job performance has become more important, and thus why you really need to invest and codify a strategy or approach within each of your teams. And it's going to be different from team to team on how you're approaching Gen AI upskilling and resetting the company culture to become a super org. See if there's any other questions here. Is the product leadership best positioned to drive the evolution of the super org? I'm a little bit biased. I'm in product, and product is such a cross-functional role, but I'm seeing things that I've never seen before, where I'm seeing QA come out with design. Like I'm seeing competitive analysis done by the engineering team, right? Like things that they don't normally do within their wheelhouse because they didn't have time or whatnot. So this bleeding between roles is fascinating. I'm still of the mindset that it needs to be bottoms up, organic and you should select ambassadors across different parts of the organization, not just within product, because people tend to bias towards their peer groups. But I guess I don't have an answer yet. I do think the CEO needs to be the champion, but that's sort of this is at least what I'm seeing.
There's also a question coming in via Q&A from Venkata who asks about governance models and the idea that within a super org, there might be AI agents that are kind of continuing to roll. And even when people move in and out, there are still those agents that are there doing things on an ongoing basis. And so do you have any thoughts on what it looks like to govern not just the org, but the agents that are also associated with the org?
Yeah. Um, I don't have a great answer for this. This topic of data governance and as a blocker, being something that actually came up in a discussion I had last week. And this company set up MCPs basically for like every third-party service they use, right? So they basically have these agents doing work, talking to all these MCPs. Physical employees might be going in and out. There's a massive data observability problem because data is flowing, and you don't know if everything's guardrailed. We should assume even within Mozilla, we have Odin, which talks about how they can jailbreak these agents and MCPs, right? So the best I've heard is people trying to run this in sort of private cloud, but in that case, they're not really talking externally. So if your entire organization has a lot of these cloud services hosted within, then at least you can kind of regulate within your own cloud. Um, I think this remains an open question. So I don't have a great answer there. If other people within chat maybe have approaches they've seen, anyone working in highly regulated industries would should have an opinion here. Obviously, Mozilla's on the other side of that spectrum as a consumer company. Um, anyone have any thoughts? I'm kind of looking at chat here again. Okay, well, maybe it can. I don't know if others here want to share live or in chat maybe tactics you have seen within your teams to drive Gen AI upskilling. I gathered what I've seen and found. I'm sure others would like to hear, particularly those maybe from non-tech sector, but anybody, anything we haven't talked about, or any other tactics you might have seen that might have worked.
And just to give folks a process for this, if you want to drop your ideas in chat, we can call on you. Or if you raise your hand, we can also enable you to talk.
Maybe maybe we've exhausted the topic, Arch. I think there was a lot of ideas there. So I mean, if there's going to be any um, final takeaway here, um, uh, please go back and at least try to take one or two things from today, from all this discussion, not from me, that you think you could do differently within your teams to help drive this forward. Because this is definitely the way things are going.